Yeah, welcome to the first B Corp, PRCA B Corp Group event of the year. For those that don't know me, my name is John Brown. I head up Don't Cry Wolf, a small B Corp agency, and I'm still chairing the B Corp Group for the PRCA this year. So the focus for today's session is going to be twofold, really. First and foremost, I've put together a little introduction into and a few sort of takeaways into the Dasgupta review. So for those that don't know, it was a review into biodiversity and its relationship with economic growth. That was conducted over the course of last year. It was commissioned in 2019. The results were released early this year, and I think there's been some fascinating takeaways, which I just want to share with the group and with the people who are part and parcel of this call. And that's going to lead us nicely on to something else which we try and fulfill in this B Corp group, which is introducing people, agencies, businesses to organizations that are geared towards helping us, helping businesses to try and meet one of those ESG criteria. So it's trying to sort of either improve their environmental footprint, to help them in their, to help the organization improve its role within society, or to help the organization govern better or improve its governance. And so I'm delighted to also have with me this evening Christian, who's the CEO, founder of Goodwings. And I am very proud to say that we are working with Goodwings, where we're actually the client for a change, rather than the other way around. So Christian has been helping Don't Cry Wolf to establish essentially a net carbon zero approach to business travel, which for us is deeply important because we report on our carbon footprint. But I think for other organizations, it's really ticking a big box in terms of understanding how a big chunk or a big part and parcel of how a business operates, especially as we move out of lockdown, which is around business travel, how much of an impact that has and how we can reduce our footprint in that space. So after I do a little chat around the Dasgupta review, I'll then be handing over to Christian, who will introduce himself, his business, and give you guys a bit of an insight into Goodwings as well. Is that all right, Christian? There's a little intro for you for now, mate. Perfect. Fantastic. Right, it's really weird not being able to see everyone. I like seeing everyone usually, but I can't see anyone, Kari. I don't know why. But I'm going to just crack on with this first part of this presentation, which is around the Dasgupta review. So just to kind of very quickly give you guys a bit of an introduction into this. So what was it? Essentially, this was a review, an independent review, and with a quite global focus, carried out by Professor Partha Dasgupta. And the whole focus of this was to look at how we measure economic success, whether prosperity and economic success takes into account natural resources, and the impact that on nature, I suppose, as well as on the wider natural world, what sort of impact and footprint that has. As we pursue this relentless pursuit for economic growth. So it was quite an in-depth review of scientific journals, peer-reviewed articles, discussions, essays. There was a panel that was formed that had experts from academia, policy, industry, all come together to kind of review the content that was out there, review the research that was out there, and then draw conclusions and directions. So what I want to try and do is to sort of distill this down into 5 key takeaways first, and then I'm going to go into a few steps that I think organizations can take and businesses need to be looking at in order to address some of these takeaways. Okay. So first and foremost, I think this was one of the most powerful statistics that we encountered in this review, or that I read through, and it's one of the key highlight or takeaways that Dasgupta has kind of shone a light on, which is this idea that produced capital per person. So basically, the sort of how useful you are as an individual to producing either goods or services has doubled between 1992 and 2014, yet natural capital per person, so essentially the natural resources available in the natural world per person, has declined by 40%. And I thought this was such a striking statistic to first be kind of sort of slapped over the face with, really, because I think we have spent an enormous amount of time in our lives and in industry as a whole, trying to pursue this kind of this better capitalism, this focus on economic growth, and this idea that if we can be more productive, we'll be better off. And actually, human capital as a whole has also improved. I think Dasgupta highlighted that 14% improvement in sort of the human capital. But the productivity is something that we have been relentlessly pursuing as a global economy. And what cost has that had? And I think what Dasgupta has made very, very clear is that this has not come as a sort of, I guess, as a freebie, if you like, that there has been an actual natural cost on the natural world, the fact that we have seen resources, access to the natural world decline. And that is, for me, one of the first striking statistics that came out from the report, which was that we knew that something was going to give, and now I think we've been able to quantify what that give looks like in order for this sort of relentless pursuit. I guess the second key takeaway was that sort of nature's worth to society, and this leads on from this, is not actually accurately reflected in market prices. And this is because much of it is open or has not had monetary value associated with it. There's a real fascinating bit of research that's currently sort of being looked at and explored, which is actually the true cost of, say, something like an iPhone 12, right? So to us, we see that cost as something like 900 quid, or gets close to £1,000 now, I think. But in actual fact, if we were to bring into that equation the cost of the impact that has on the natural world through mining the resources required to make the chipsets, if we brought even into this the idea of poor working practices within those mines, the cost of recycling or not being able to recycle the phone itself, some of the parts and labor that is used to create that product, all of that is not factored in to that cost. And if it was, there's a theory out there now that the cost of the iPhone 12 should be more akin to £9,000 than £900, if we were to put a real market value to what the natural cost of it is, as well as the actual sort of the manufacturing costs of it. I think this is really important, because what we're starting to see is this idea that actually, we have to start allocating pounds and pence to the impact we're having on the natural world when it comes to pursuing success and growth, creating our products, providing our services. And one of the reasons why things have got so out of balance, according to the Dasgupta review, is the fact that we have not actually provided any real monetary cost or value to the natural world when we look at things from an economic, productivity and consumer perspective. I think that's a real challenge that, as society and as brands, there's an opportunity there to really look deeply as to whether that natural cost is being associated with either our products, our services, or even our ideas of success. I guess the third key thing that Dasgupta highlights is that nature needs to enter economic and financial decision making the same way, not the same way, the same way buildings, machines, roads, and skills do. I think this is a sort of a lead on from that last statement, which is that right now, we're not currently factoring in this grander cost, this significant part of what allows us to create some of the infrastructure, products and services in our world. We're not factoring that in to some of the economic and financial decisions. And one of the things that I thought was quite interesting was when, and there was a few scenarios such as this. So I think we can all remember in the Shenzhen province in China, when that enormous earthquake took place, killing tens of thousands of people. The GDP rose. There was an improvement in the GDP as a result of that earthquake, because of the investment in infrastructure, in productivity to rebuild and regenerate that area. What it didn't take into account was what was lost, either from the natural environment, but also even in a sort of almost even more shameful way, the human cost of that as well. So if you took into account the roads that were being built, there's infrastructure that was being created as a result of trying to rebuild that area, it created this positive blip in GDP, where in actual fact, if you added in the cost from a natural perspective, from a human cost perspective as well, you would see a much far different statistic emerge. And I think when what Dasgupta has been highlighting throughout his review is that if we do not start taking into account these factors, then the balance will start, the shift from being able to account for a far more balanced environment will start, and that chasm will start to grow. So that chasm between economic pursuit and natural cost will start to grow, rather than readdress that balance. I think this was one of the other stats, which I don't want to get too kind of grim around all of this, but we talk about that chasm between sort of economic growth and pursuing economic growth relentlessly, and actually what that cost is on natural resource. And I think there's nothing more evident than this stat here, which is that biodiversity is declining faster than at any time in human history, with extinction rates 100 to 1,000 times higher than baseline rates. So there is a very clear, urgent need for this to be addressed. I think this provided the urgency behind what we need to fix, which is allocating an appropriate cost to the natural world, factoring that into our decision making. This gives us that urgency as well. Like, the time to do this and to fix this is almost certainly now. I think the final thing that was the primary takeaway with all of this is that the solution starts with understanding and accepting a very simple truth, that our economies are embedded within nature, not external to it. And the more that we are capable and able to marry the two together and provide a realistic cost of opportunity as well, the closer we'll get to rebalancing this equation between economic and that pursuit of economic growth and the cost of the natural environment. So what I then wanted to kind of delve into is three things that we could potentially be doing, either as organizations and also as communicators, how we could potentially be trying to address some of this in our day-to-day activity, and also impart our influence on those that we're either working with at an agency level or on those that we're working with in-house, to try and get to see whether we can start addressing some of these core issues. So first and foremost, and I think I've said this pretty much on every single time that we've met, but we need to know our footprint. One of the things that Dasgupta made very, very clear in the review was that it's the understanding, the first step that we need to be taking is understanding what the impact is, first and foremost. So knowing our footprint is crucial. It gives us that opportunity to then address the core problems, to look into and to explore what needs to be done to fix some of the areas. But without knowing, we're fighting in the dark. So I think one of the core things to come out of the review that needs to start being applied in our world is that as communicators, I think the first thing that we should be focused on is, rather than trying to create a campaign or a set of messaging that promotes externally this position that we should be, you know, a kind of a more sustainable or more balanced world, we should be first looking inwardly and working out, well, what is our impact on all of this? And what I would urge, and what I'd love to see more of, are less, I suppose, eco-consumer campaigns taking place, where, you know, we're doing little more than promoting people to switch plastic coffee cups for bamboo coffee cups, and actually start a little bit more inwardly focused and start working out, well, what is it that we're actually impacting first? As an organization, or as an agency, as a government institution, what's our footprint? How do we make that step change? And then communicate how others can take notes. It's far easier to get people on board if you can give them a real life example. I think it's absolutely critical that one of the things that Dasgupta highlights, which is that knowing and understanding, is reflected in our work. I think the second thing is to redefine success. You know, and this is, I don't know, this is something that's coming into sort of, I suppose, better into wider business language more and more as we see more impact reports get produced and we see more organizations share things such as their commitments and their approach to ESG. But I think one of the things that we need to look at from a comms perspective is, you know, if we have got a fantastic good news story, which we do, you know, we either product sold out, business performance has been outstanding, whatever it might be, it would be important to look at how we can redefine that success by giving a slightly more in-depth view of not just how many products were sold, how much money was earned, what that profit margin looked like, but what does that enable us to do? What does that encourage the organization to then do from an ESG perspective? How has the cost of that success been weighed up? What has that impact been on the natural environment as a result of that product being released? It's not about necessarily opening yourself up to criticism, but it's about transparently communicating what success means, but also what it costs as well. And I think one of the most interesting things that we can start to understand and start to identify is, you know, how as an organization can we or how as a business or as an agency or as a government organization redefine what success looks like, so it goes beyond just economic benefit, growth, and looks into how we can measure that against the natural environment and human capital. I guess the final bit in all of this, and this is B Corp Month, so it's important to sort of mention this as well, is how do we champion better business as a whole? There's something which I really urge everyone to start taking a look at, which is the Better Business Act. If you guys haven't seen it yet, I urge you to go and dig out some information and to see whether you can get behind this, support this, or even float this as an idea as a whole to the organizations and the agencies that you're working with. But essentially, there's a movement that's currently taking place in the UK, which is looking to amend Section 172 of the Companies Act. So right now, Section 172, which I think if you're a B Corp, you're very, very familiar with, but essentially this part of the Companies Act, which we all sign with Companies House, essentially says that a business should be run for the benefit of its shareholders. What there is a movement before now, there's a movement now taking place, which B Corp is becoming part and parcel of right now, which is to have that changed so that it also takes into account, yes, stakeholders within the organization, but the wider public and the planet also. What that would mean is that organizations are fundamentally set up to report on a triple bottom line, to provide direction to industry leaders that says you must lead your business in a way that, yes, is in tune with your shareholders, but also is in harmony with people and with the planet as well. And I think when we see it, we should call it out as success. When we do it ourselves, we should be unashamedly celebrating it as organizations. And once we've done that, we should, without a doubt, be championing that movement to take place. So I think, in summary, with the sort of the impact of the Dasgupta review has been a clear identification of this chasm between economic growth and the natural world. A clear view that we've seen the natural world have no monetary value associated with it. And therefore, the measures of success that we currently have, such as GDP, are measures that aren't really taking into account any sort of negatives as a result of the impact on the natural world. And that really we don't, until we truly understand what that impact is, that chasm's only going to get bigger. So I'd say to repeat those three takeaways: we understand our footprint and really closely understand what that impact is that we have on the wider world. And if we redefine what that success looks like for us as an organization, and then champion that success and champion that way of doing better business, I think we can start to address some of those key issues that Dasgupta raised. So it's one of the things that I wanted. That was a very whistle-stop tour of a 115-page document and report. But I'll just pause for a moment. Are there any questions or thoughts, or anyone else who's read through that review who wanted to draw any of those other bits and pieces out from it? I don't know how to do this, by the way. Is there a Q&A section? Oh, there's some chats happening. So I work for public trading companies, heavily investing. How would you advise these organizations who are dealing with and managing investors' expectations? Would you say to people you believe in ESG or profits? You talked about redefining success. Could you give us good examples of good companies with good governance doing well? Okay, cool. There's a lot in there. So I think it's really interesting, Jennifer. So Jennifer's working for public traded companies. How would you advise these organizations who are dealing with and managing investors' expectations? So I think there's a few things here. I think actually investors' expectations are already changing. So if you take a look at how, I suppose, one of the leading markers in this big financial world, which is BlackRock, already shifting its focus towards organizations that can prove and give a sense of value around a triple bottom line, so provide very clear direction and proof around their ESG commitments, combined with the fact that last year I think ESG stocks outperformed the rest of the market in 2020. I would say that there's almost a sort of, I think that there is a almost fear that investors won't buy into this, but it's actually investors who are already changing their perception. I genuinely believe that the discussion around within the financial system itself is already starting to shift quite dramatically. And I'd say, BlackRock is a key marker in the sand for an organization that is, dominating in that financial world, who's made it very, very clear that ESG is at the absolute core of their future investments. So I think that the conversation's already being had. It's about at what level should an organization or should a communicator kind of pitch that in, depending on that on the existing appetite. And I don't. Also, I think it's important to highlight. I don't think it's an ESG or profits discussion either. I think that's absolutely critical to sort of get across quite quickly. There's, I think Unilever's sustainable brand portfolio contributed the most amount of growth to that organization, which is, I think it's about 28 or 30 brands who are in their sort of sustainable ESG future brand kind of grouping. I mean, they are contributing a significant amount of growth to that organization. So I don't think it's an ESG or profits discussion. I think it's both. And actually, that's another thing that we need to get quite comfortable with, that profit isn't a dirty word either. The fact that you have a commitment to ESG, the signals are that is improving profit margins as well. So, and that is a whole message around better business, which is it's not a choice between one or another. I don't think that there is it's not necessarily an altruistic piece of work. It is actually creating a better organization that is leading to better margins as well. I mean, organizations that I think are doing well, I've already mentioned how Unilever is sort of pivoting towards this as a big organization that's moving quite heavily toward in this direction. I mentioned sort of the focus that BlackRock is having and how that's moving other organizations towards this as well. I mean, I think we've already had this mentioned by Ed, but I'm a huge admirer of what Triodos Bank is doing. You know, in an environment where, to be quite honest, I don't think a lot of the major financial institutions are doing enough yet. I think Triodos is doing an incredible job, and I highly recommend people to go and check them out to kind of see how an organisation in a very, very tough market, a tough landscape, is really addressing some of these core issues. And then, I mean, in the consumer world, there's a whole heap of stuff that's happening. But what I would say, I find some of the sort of the bigger industry, or I suppose the bigger B2B organizations, quite a touch more fascinating right now, because I think there's a lot of consumer organizations that are virtue signaling in the right way, saying that they want to do X, Y, and Z. And you know, sometimes their response is, hey, we've taken our previously really, really harmful product and now we're using 50% recycled polyester. You know, I don't think that's good enough. I think that's playing up to eco-consumerism, which is a problem as well. Whereas I think there's, you know, the likes of Triodos and organizations who are fundamentally changing themselves from the inside out, I think are doing an extraordinary job of fulfilling some of this. So Ed says, the report suggests nature-based accounting. Some, such as George Monbiot, think it is mad to put a value on nature. However, surely we need to get it into P&Ls. Absolutely. Otherwise, how does our capitalist model not just continue to take from nature and not factor in as we grapple for endless GDP growth? I mean, yeah, Ed, I couldn't agree more. I think it's, and actually this leads into sort of the friction that Stuart raises as well, which is, you know, the price of this is catastrophic, could be catastrophic for companies. I think there needs to be a discussion held that it doesn't have to necessarily be reflected straight away into consumer pricing, but it needs to be absolutely understood. And I think this is one of the key things, is that right now it's not being factored in at all. So it's just seen as a sort of, as just a free resource, an endless well, if you like, that is being dipped into and the resource removed from, without there being any real cost factored in. I think if we aren't going to factor in a true cost of this directly into consumer pricing straight away, at the very least what we can do is factor in the true cost when we're assessing our own footprint and trying to understand our own organizations. I think this is the first crucial step. It's not a sort of immediate shift into let's make an iPhone cost £9,000. Although there's an argument to be said that perhaps we don't need to release a new one and then an R version and an RS version 3 times a year. However, I think at the very least, we should be looking at the impact creating one has on the natural world and putting a monetary value into that and then accounting for it. So that green accounting, if you like, on the P&L. Has that covered off? I think that's covered off a couple of questions. Sorry, I'm not particularly au fait with the Q&A system on this. Usually I just have a like Zoom free-for-all. But hopefully that's answered that. Cool. So I guess the next part in this is the part where I sit back and take a few sips of water and I listen to someone who's far more intelligent than I am. because they've gone ahead and actually not just sort of created an agency that's gone and been a B Corp, but actually created a business that is fundamentally helping organizations do that first bit really, really well, which is understand their footprint, and then help them kind of solve a big challenge. So Christian. Hello, you are live and here. Let me stop screen sharing. I think what would be, I mean, firstly, do you have any thoughts yourself on what we've just been discussing there, Christian?
I do. First of all, hi, Christian from Copenhagen. I think what you're referring to is a topic that I'm troubling my mind with all the time, this extractivism, this idea that we can just, use from the nature for our own profit, and there's no price on it. And I think until we have a situation where we internalize it, or carbon tax, or whatever you want to call it, I think what we need to do is to find ways of getting it into the product or service, but within the price, within the parity rate level, because and that goes across most industries, not all, but most industries are enormously price driven. I can talk a little bit about that, and I will when the travel industry that I'm part of. I started out a bit naive that people would probably want to do, pay a little extra to travel in a more conscious way, but they're not even the most impact driven ones, because we're prone to find that plane ticket the cheapest. We're not going to spend 2 hours finding it and then say, well, sure, add to cart 30 pounds extra to do something good. So we must change the mechanism of modern capitalism to be more inclusive and responsible. And until then, we need to come up with innovative ideas, creative ideas on how to internalize it without increasing the price, because then demand just goes elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on a more fundamental level, I think I actually wrote you an email while you were talking that we need to co-author thought piece together on redefining success, because I'm writing on such a paper actually. So hopefully we can do that. But I mean, my own journey started 20 years ago. I started after a couple of years in the Danish military. I studied at Copenhagen Business School, and I accidentally got signed up for philosophy and business the first year with this combination. And 1 hour I was reading Aristotle, Kant, and the next microeconomics.
Yeah.
And what was crazy was that you could actually go at Copenhagen Business School, and I still think you can today, and any other business school, and not have a single moment where you reflect on what is the role of business in society. We're just mass producing more business leaders with a paradigm which is 50 years old.
Yeah.
And so we need to change also the institutions that are producing the mindset of the business community. Because what is a business? I mean, I don't know, 180 years or so ago, we came up with this idea of a limited company. Why? Because nobody in their right mind would invest and risk their personal fortune on big infrastructure projects like railroads across Europe or the US. So, all right, let's create this legal structure that we call a person, but has a limited liability. We can put everything in there, and if that fails, I still have my money. Okay. And this mechanism has just, continued and turned into this hyper capitalism. But really, we're just a bunch of people coming together and calling ourselves Goodwings or Don't Cry Wolf. And we need to reflect on what is our role in society as humans and as business leaders and owners.
Yeah.
So I think you had a ton of interesting talking points that you addressed.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think what would be fab, Christian, is if you gave the intro into how Goodwings came about and how it's evolved into what you're doing today.
I will. So it is really weird that I can't see anyone, but hey guys. So 5 years ago, I hadn't been in tech, I hadn't been in travel. I had started other businesses in health and health tech, but more consulting kind of companies. And by chance, I ran into this guy who used to be a senior Expedia professional. And I said, how come there's a growing demand for a more sustainable, responsible way of traveling, but nobody is offering solutions? Well, it's simple. People don't want to pay extra. I was like, that can't really be the case. So I started to look into it, and he was right. Because of these aggregators, these monsters where you can, compare 1,000 different websites at the same time, the only thing that we care about at the time of purchase is to get the plane ticket, the hotel room, the rental car as cheap as possible, which is potentially not wrong, bad, immoral. That's just how it is. So how can you change the industry? And then I looked into the financial reports of Priceline, the company behind Booking.com and Expedia and these major giants. And I learned that they were not, in reality, they're not travel companies. They're marketing engines. Every time they make $10, they spend $7 on more advertising. They literally run down to the marketing guy, 10 times a day with the, bags full of money, more Google ads, more TV commercials. And altogether, they spend $40 to $45 billion every year just to be top of mind, just so you don't remember hotels.com, Trivago, and all these goddamn annoying commercials. And I was like, how can we change that? What if we could reach the consumers and disrupt the go-to-market approach, not spend that much money on advertising, if any? We could funnel $45 billion to projects, getting us closer to realizing the 17 global goals. So at the time, I had worked with nonprofits for 10, 15 years. And I said, I called a lot of friends that I had in the nonprofit sector here in the Nordics. And I said, what if you were my advertising engines? So we don't spend money on traditional ads, but instead we get to the consumers, to the businesses through the Danish Cancer Society, WWF, Plastic Change, and all these guys who are increasingly commercializing themselves because they need new sources of funding. And they all said, well, that's a good idea. Let's try. So we raised some money. We started building the technology. We got the sourcing right. And 3 years later, in 2018, we basically had a hotel platform with the same user experience, inventory, and rates as the major giants. But you never heard about us because we only market ourselves through these nonprofits. Then we grew it, and we had 155 nonprofits in 40 countries, and it started to work. It was very difficult because a lot of the nonprofits were very good at receiving money and less on helping us generating it. So we did a lot of fuck ups, and we did some few right things, and we tried to continue doing that. And 6 consecutive months up until COVID, I thought, now I can lean back and start to breathe and, remember my children's names and all that. And then in 3 days, everything just collapsed because COVID hit us. Back to square one. So in March, we were like collapsed a year ago. At the time, we'd spent £4 million, which is a lot in a Danish context when you're not funded by VCs, but only from like high net worth individuals and like private money, real people's money. So we decided, should we just close shop, or should we reinvent ourselves, refocus? And in the second quarter of 2020, I started like crazy calling all our existing clients, many of them. And I said, please, in your words, can you describe what we are to you? Yeah, sure. Well, it's very sympathetic. We appreciate the relationship that we have and the fact that we can support this nonprofit in Peru or Tibet, but it's not really business critical. And I said, how can supporting the 17 global goals without having to pay any extra, not be business critical? Well, it doesn't really tap into our core strategies. However, if you can come through COVID with a concept that can align our climate concerns with the way that we do business travel, then you're onto something. So I've worked in all aspects of sustainability, from human rights and labor rights, anti-corruption, bribery, public-private partnerships, health, never really into climate. So I thought I need some climate experts on my team, assembled an advisory board, and spent the second half of 2020 talking closely with them, using them, and we came up with this idea of net zero travel. And I would love if I can share a few slides with you, because then it's not just words, but I can, put some pictures on. So
please do.
Just see if I can share my screen. And hopefully this goes without losing you guys. So basically okay, you can see, right? Okay. And I'll try to get through as fast as possible so we can have some time for the Q&A. Basically, we totally pivoted during COVID. We put a pause on all our existing nonprofit partnerships. We redefined ourselves. In January this year, 2 months ago, we came out with a net zero travel concept, enabling businesses to travel more climate friendly. I'm not going to pretend that we've developed a hydrogen airplane. We haven't. But we can do more. And basically what we're doing is we're measuring and verifiably removing the emissions that you have when you travel. So your net result is zero. So if you fly from Copenhagen to New York and back, 3 nights in a hotel, some meals at restaurants, cab, all that, 2.5 tons roughly, we've removed 2.5 tons from the atmosphere. So basically the way we do it is, and the only small change that you need to make as an organization is to decide that from now on, we're going to book our hotels with Goodwings. Even though we only sell you the hotel, we can calculate your total travel emissions from your transportation, accommodation, everything, and verifiably remove it on you. And we pay for it. So it doesn't increase the price of the hotel. So many of the businesses that we attract are, I would say, like professional service companies, office companies. We do have a lot of production companies that are B Corps, who obviously emit much more in scope 1 and 2, but most of our companies don't. So for that matter, scope 3, and especially business travel, is where the big emitter is. Often they don't know how much it is. Coming back to your argument, they don't really know, 2.5 tons, that sounds like a lot. How much is that really? How much do I emit as an average, Danish person? Well, 12 tons. Wow, then it's a lot. Okay, so basically what we offer and what we've spent the last now 5 years on is building the technology and getting the sourcing right, so we can offer you a platform with the same hotels, 1 million hotels around the world, comparable rates with major platforms, but should you choose to book it with us, you will be traveling net zero. So we basically, what we do is we calculate it when you book your hotel. We have 2 data points. We know roughly where you are when you book the hotel. We can see Christian is sitting in Copenhagen, he's booking a hotel in Berlin. So if we know how you transport yourselves, we can actually calculate that. And let me just show you actually how that is being done. So I'm just booking a hotel in Berlin and quickly picking a few dates in April. And I get like a selection of hotels to choose from. I find a hotel, just pick a random room type and on with it. Now I have to move this one around here. Okay, so basically, I'm not going to show you the website in details because that's really boring and very much like you're used to. We do, however, like to say that we have proudly copied Airbnb kind of look and never gonna do all the tricks that our competitors do, like 3 people are looking at this hotel, John, hurry. It's like the only type of product where people are lining up and where there's so much scarcity on the supply. It's just hilarious. Anyway, so if you're in a hurry, you can just say, well, I go to Berlin via air, rail, bus, or car. And you can see that your footprint changes accordingly. If you want to be a bit more granular, you can click here and you can say, well, I am going from Copenhagen. I'm taking the metro to the airport. I fly economy class straight from Copenhagen to Berlin. When I get to Berlin, I'm going to take a taxi. I'll take one of these green taxi solutions. So with a few clicks, we can accurately measure your emissions from your transfer, flight, hotel, even 3 meals a day. We have like an average for that. So such a round trip is emitting roughly 1/4 ton of CO2. So what we do with that is, knowing how much you emitted, we then proudly remove that on your behalf. And we do that through nature-based solutions. I think you mentioned it earlier. We looked into more tech-driven solutions like direct air capture. It hasn't, I think, or the experts that I consult with, what I think it doesn't really matter, but the experts say 5-6 years ahead of us, this might be a viable solution. At the moment, it's cost inefficient. It's too expensive. It's around $1,000 per ton removed. This is why the EU and the UN suggest that we focus much more on nature-based solutions. And one of those is planting trees. So you can't really go to any website these days without them saying, well, don't worry, we've carbon compensated your freight or whatever. Well, what does it mean, for God's sake? You carbon compensated. Where did you plant a tree? Has it been removed, or is it going to be removed potentially in 35 years? So what we do only is investing in carbon removal that has taken place and that is third-party validated. So we have invested in this project in the Uruguay, 20,000 hectares of land being turned into forest and set to remove actually 20 million tons of CO2 in its lifespan. They can only sell 30% because there's a major buffer pool of 70% on these types of projects in case of a wildfire or illegal harvesting and so on. So every 2 years, 3 years, an organization comes out and they verify that this forest is still here. The forest has grown, and the forest has, since we were here 2 years ago, absorbed yet another 2, 3, 4, 500 tons of CO2. Those 100,000 tons of CO2 are called carbon units. 1 unit equals 1 ton. And that's being uploaded to Verra, the world's largest greenhouse gas registry. So the deal we have made with Verra is something I'm very proud of, because when I go in and I pay to remove the 100 tons of CO2 that Don't Cry Wolf emits in 21, we can register in Verra. Goodwings has removed 100 tons on behalf of Don't Cry Wolf. For someone who has worked in sustainability for 20 years, this is, I know it's a bit nerdy, but it's super important to be as transparent as possible, because transparency creates trust. And we want to first of all show our clients and educate them on how much they emit by choosing this or that type of transportation, but also knowing that we went in and we removed those 400 tons on behalf of you. And if you click on this link, it'll take you straight to Verra, and you can see that it actually took place. It's not something that we just put on a booking confirmation and you just trust us. You can see it with your own eyes. So all in all, we're now in a position where we are signing up 2 to 3 times as many businesses per month compared to pre-COVID. It's crazy. I mean, we haven't really moved out of the depression, and as we joked about the last time, we're still doing a lot of cocaine to keep our our minds straight. That's a joke. But I mean, I think really we have tried to get as much good out of this very depressing time. And I think we're onto something. We enable businesses to travel net zero. They get their emissions removed, verified. They get a certificate that they can use in their climate reporting. They get access to all this data, because all the data that we log every time you book a hotel is being logged, and you can download it as a spreadsheet, so you have complete transparency on how we build your calculation. And basically, right now we're getting all our old clients onto the new concept, which is going very well, and introducing our pricing model because, and I don't do this because it's a sales meeting, because I don't really know who I'm selling to. But the reason I'm showing you this is just to so you fully understand how we have innovated in this very old school industry. Okay, everyone is chasing transactional revenue. Everyone is chasing that sales margin, that sales commission, the 5 to 10% you get as an online platform when you sell a hotel. And this is very unhealthy, because this is the reason that none of the big players dare to do anything else, because they're just chasing the KPIs, more traffic, better conversions, more money. By doing this, we don't care how much money, how many bookings we make. We hope that our clients will use us much more, because every booking means one more net zero travel. But we don't make money from the transactions themselves. We make money from the membership fees that the companies pay us, which makes our business model a hell of a lot healthier, because it's a subscription-based service, and we don't need to use any dirty tricks. So yeah.
Brilliant.
All right. I think that's it. Let me just see if I can find my way back to you.
Look, well, there's some quick. Stuart's already got a question, but I'll just I'll ask a couple to give some others the time to put forward their questions as well, and then we'll go to Stuart's. But I was just going to ask very quickly. There's a couple of things that stood out for me. I think one of the things was when we first spoke many moons ago, Christian. I gave the usual spiel around, oh look, is this another thing where you're going to tell me that I've flown from London to New York and then you're going to plant a tree that in 150 years time might make a difference? Like, I'm not interested. How much are you having to tackle the sort of the negativity that's associated with carbon credits, with offsetting, and why is what you're doing different?
I would actually hope that we would be tackling more criticism. The reason we're not really being asked any tough questions is people don't really know much about it. Mm-hmm. I did a chronicle in the Danish, the largest business newspaper here in Denmark, where I criticized the dairy producer Arla, Danish company, produces milk, yogurt, and cheese and so on, because they have a milk now that they call CO2 neutral. But if I looked into the website, they're not buying removals. Why? Because removals are much more expensive. Mm-hmm. They're just buying the cheap credits, carbon compensation as such, which is also important. But 95% of all carbon credits available are what you can recall or refer to as avoidances. You help someone else avoid emitting more CO2. That doesn't solve the methane, from your milk. So I think what I want to do is I want to educate people, our clients, inform them about carbon offsetting is just an umbrella term. Underneath are avoidances and removals. Yep. We need drastically to move into removals, because avoidances were very important 10, 5, even 3 years ago. It made more sense financially to build yet another coal plant in India. It doesn't today. Mm-hmm. So the reason that we need to move towards investing in removing CO2 from the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. And the last one from me. One of the challenges that any B Corp will tell you is the endless amount of reporting that we need to do and the transparency. I know. Yeah. That we need to, which as well, and especially if you then go into sort of actually having your carbon footprint measured. How much of thought went into the idea that actually what we want, and what certainly one of the things that appealed to me was the fact I could essentially hand over my travel reporting to you guys to get that done. How much of that is sort of factored into the way you've evolved the business, and is that something that you would see continuing in terms of its evolution?
I think it would. I think it actually we didn't really. I don't think we really knew how big a problem it was. I think we talked more to the heart. Yeah. And we learned that we were actually also talking to the mind, to the brain, because to the more logic, rational, we have a problem here around just calculating, not spending hundreds of hours of going through expense reports from this, hotel booking, this flight over here, trying to do the calculation ourselves. So, but we have learned that it's a big problem that we help solve, which is also the reason for the success that we're experiencing right now. Going forward, I think we can be even stronger on data. We need to add more verticals. We need to have flights, but I don't want to add flights until we have trains. Yeah. Because when you book a flight from Copenhagen to Berlin, I want to come up with a big pop-up that says, "Don't book this flight." Go by train, because we don't need to make that transactional money, which is quite fundamental to me. So we have that. We can be that activistic platform that says, why don't you consider taking the train to Stockholm or Berlin or wherever,
Yeah. Stuart has asked, how do you pay for the carbon credits to remove the carbon, the client CO2?
Super good question, because it is very expensive. I'm sure that Stuart is aware that removing a ton through such a verified project costs, the market rate at the moment is around $20 per ton. We use our sales commission fully. So we can afford to pay for it on behalf of the client, which is fundamentally different from anywhere else in the industry, because they spend all their money on ads, but we don't. So we actually have the financial opportunity to pay for it, and that means that you can travel, net zero for free as an individual or as a company. I think the pricing plans that I briefly went through we also have a free one, because it's important for me to democratize a new way of traveling that you don't have to pay for it. You could just do it.
Any other questions that we've got through? We've got one fan from Jennifer's very, very happy with this. She's said that this is a brilliant idea and concept and business. Have we got any other questions for Christian before we log off, guys? Okay, so Christian, thank you so much for your time and for sharing that. How can people reach you if they want to get in touch to find out more, or put forward, maybe start discussing different plans and getting involved?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah,
great. Connect
and text, and let's chat. Sure.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, Christian, thanks so much again. It was really insightful. I'm absolutely delighted to be one of your clients, and I'm kind of looking forward to using the service, because it would mean that we're also out of this complete shitty nightmare that we find ourselves in for a long, long time. So next up, Kyrie, do you want to give any notes or any major things that the PRCA is doing?
John, nothing from my side, but if there's anything from your side you want to talk about, maybe the next event or anything like that, it's up to you, mate.
So yeah, the next event is scheduled. We're going to try and do one a quarter. The next event is scheduled for towards the end of Q2. We're going to try and be a bit flexible with the date, because it might mean that we have some sort of scenario where there's maybe a bit of a live element to it, probably limited tickets of some kind. But how magnificent would that be if we were able to do something that is a sort of spring, summer outside event of some kind? So we are.
It's much needed. It's much needed.
It is absolutely much needed. And I'm sure all of you are thinking, gosh, do you know what? I don't want to go on summer holidays or anything like that. What I want to do is go to the next B Corp Group event in the summer before anything else. But yeah, so we're going to be looking at a live event. In the meantime, please do check out the B Corp Month content that's been going live from B Corp UK, just to see what work's being done. Do follow that Better Business Act movement, and thank you all for joining us.